Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I've got my father, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio, and we're going to start off with our foundational verse like we always do. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. For he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. I would say, Dad, that's almost like it's a proclamation. It's a starting point, almost like Canada is founded on the supremacy of God and the rule of law. You know what I mean? It's like, boom, that's where we start. That's how we should look at things, correct?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we just celebrated what we now call Canada Day, but years ago it was called Dominion Day. And Dominion Day was taken out of the Psalms, which says that God, will have dominion from sea to sea. And that passage of scripture is enshrined in stone on some of the government buildings in Ottawa. So our country was born 158 years ago. And in being so, we established that we understood the earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants, belong to the Lord. Today, we have got so far away from that most people don't understand it. And being that one of our guests, again, is one of our repeat guests, a lawyer, we are not even sure that judges and lawyers understand the supremacy of God and the rule of law, which this nation was built on.
Yeah, well, we asked Chris that the other day when we had him. Let's ask our guest. We've got John Carpay on. John, welcome back to the show. We appreciate you.
Glad to be with you.
We're going to ask you the same thing we asked Chris to start off the show real quick. Do judges recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law? Chris, just so you know, in case you didn't see the program, said they recognize the rule of law, but not so much the supremacy of God. Do you feel the same?
There's a lot more case law about the rule of law. So the supremacy of God, I think, some judges get a bit squeamish and say, well, let's just talk about the Charter Section 2A, protection for freedom of religion and conscience, but let's not talk about the supremacy of God. So there's not a lot of case law on it. Yeah.
Can you really separate, and that was my question to Chris, can you really separate the rule of law from the supremacy of God?
I know some good atheists and good agnostics who believe very strongly in human rights, and I've not yet had the deeper conversations as to how you can arrive at that point without a belief in God and a belief in right and wrong and a belief in morality. But there are people who are atheist or agnostic who are very strong supporters of human rights. So they must have some way of saying that there are human rights, even in the absence of God. I think philosophically, it's a lot easier to say that, if we are made in the image of God and our rights come from God, then necessarily restrictions have to be placed on government. Whereas if our rights come from government, well, then government can legitimately take them away. So I see the supremacy of God is an important legal concept, but I do acknowledge that there are atheists who are very, very staunch believers in putting restraints and restrictions on government, and they believe wholeheartedly in human rights, maybe according to natural law, but without God necessarily.
Well, speaking on human rights, it's interesting you bring that up. It feels like they're being stripped away from Canadians every single day. One of the bills that's been in the news, recently and for a while now, Bill C-2, we talked a little bit about it, and a strong Borders Act, but it's starting to feel like a strong Surveillance Act. Can we go into it a little more? Because I don't think people really fully understand what they're going to lose or what opportunity the government's going to take through this bill.
Yeah, the Bill C2, as you mentioned, the Strong Borders Act, it does have some provisions in there to streamline the refugee application process and to put in new requirements, different requirements for that have to be abided by. So part of it does pertain to immigration and refugees, but there's provisions, for example, that have nothing to do with strong borders. Using cash in amounts greater than $10,000 to donate to a charity or to make a purchase would become illegal. So we're talking about criminalizing the use of cash. Canada Post acquires the right to open your mail without a warrant from the court. Goods destined for export can be subject to inspection anywhere in Canada. So if you're in Winnipeg or Vermilion or Vancouver and you've got goods destined for export in your garage, government authorities can come in without a warrant. Police can demand subscriber information from large telecom companies, and the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, his officials can enter any home of an electronic services provider, but electronic services provider is defined so broadly that it applies to pretty much anybody who has a computer. So it's huge. It opens the door to searches without a warrant. And that's the key point, because we have a 158-year-old tradition in Canada where if police want to enter your home, they need a court order, and they need to obtain that court order by putting evidence before the judge that they have strong reasons to believe that you're carrying on criminal activity. So Bill C2, and I'm sorry for going, it's a 100-page bill, but in a nutshell, it takes us a third of the way to becoming a full-on police state where police can just enter homes without a warrant.
I'm glad you brought that
passed?
No, just first reading for now, and then it'll be, second reading, third reading. There is a small, so far the NDP has spoken out against it. The Bloc Québécois has not in favor of it. So there's a small chance it might not get through, but it's important for people to contact their MPs.
The Conservative Party doesn't say anything?
They have criticized some provisions of the bill. It is hard when this bill, it changes the criminal code, it changes the Customs Act, it changes the the Drugs and Controlled Substances Act. It creates new legislation called the Authorized Access to Information Act. So this thing goes on for 150 pages. I've read most of it. There's parts of it I haven't even read yet, and it is so big. So, but yes, the Conservative Party has been criticizing it, as far as I know. Yes.
My biggest problem with this is, a lot of people say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong or anything illegal, it should be fine. You know what I mean? Like, what do I care? But the problem is it's what they always do. It's what they did during COVID. Hey, for your safety, we're going to lock everyone down. It seems the same thing for the safety, of the people, we're going to protect our borders and then go through your mail. How do we get people to understand that we are losing rights and freedoms here and giving a tremendous amount of power to the government and to the police force that they shouldn't have? How do we wake people up?
Well, the long-term solution is to change our culture and to improve our education system, whether that's public schools or private schools or home education, whatever the means or avenue. We have to teach history again. People who are ignorant of history can be persuaded of just about anything. And if you don't know about history, you don't know about Germany in the 1930s or the Soviet Union that went on for 7 decades, violating property rights and religious freedom and parental rights. You don't know about Cambodia's killing fields and Pol Pot. You don't know about the military junta in Argentina, where tens of thousands of people in the 1970s were just disappeared, and many of them were murdered. And my point is this: the government can be good for certain things, national defense and, protecting the country against foreign invaders. setting up and establishing an impartial court system. There's some good functions that we need government for. I don't advocate for anarchy. However, anybody who has studied history can see that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the more power that you give to government, including police, which is an arm of government, the more likely they are to violate your rights and freedoms.
Let's move on to a power move. You were recently, I think it had to do with the Western Standard, talking about the suspending of Bill 26. Can you explain to people what Bill 26 is and give us an update on a little bit about it?
So Bill 26 is legislation in Alberta that was introduced in 2024. It protects vulnerable minors from puberty blockers and opposite sex hormones. And this Alberta legislation says that doctors cannot prescribe puberty blockers and opposite sex hormones. So that would be prescribing testosterone for girls or prescribing estrogen for boys. You cannot do this for kids under the age of 16. And then ages 16 and 17, possibly, yes, with parental consent, and no surgeries to be conducted before the age of 18. So this is designed to protect vulnerable children from transgender ideology, which falsely promises children that it's possible to become a member of the opposite sex, when in fact, no, you can take drugs, you can mutilate your body, but you never really become a member of the opposite sex. And so this is in line, by the way, with what's happening in the United Kingdom, Sweden, Finland, Norway, so many other countries. They are banning entirely or severely restricting this giving of puberty blockers and opposite sex hormones to minors. So this was challenged in court by a gay rights group called Egal Canada, and they unfortunately they obtained an interim injunction on Friday, June 27th. And so the Alberta Court of King's Bench ruled that this legislation is going to be paused. It's going to be put on hold for months or years until the legislation goes to trial and there's a full trial. Only then can the legislation possibly come into force.
So when it's put on hold, does that mean you can give children puberty blockers and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's continuing. It's on. This has been going on for years, by the way, that in Alberta and all across Canada, these activist doctors who subscribe to transgender ideology, they are putting, so if a boy comes into the doctor's office and says that he feels like a girl, he believes he is a girl trapped in a boy's body, some of these doctors will say, okay, well, we'll put you on puberty blockers, which almost always leads to opposite sex hormones. So then the boy is going to get estrogen. He's not going to develop or mature sexually. He will never become a father, nor will he ever become a mother either. And so these doctors are giving testosterone to girls who permanently get facial hair. They get a deep masculine voice, and they will not be able to conceive or bear children. This has been going on for a long time in Alberta and all across Canada. Alberta is one of the first provinces in Canada to put some restrictions on this and say, look, you cannot give puberty blockers and opposite sex hormones to teenagers or children under the age of 16.
This gets very discouraging because we always, it's like taking one step forward and two steps back.
10 steps back.
It seems like, pardon me?
10 steps back.
Okay, 10 steps back.
I'm encouraged that there is a government in Canada led by a premier who is not a churchgoer, who would not describe herself as a social conservative. And she has said, we're going to rein in these activist doctors and provide protection to children so that they are not making decisions as teenagers to become permanently infertile. And so I see that as very positive, and the government has fought back very hard against this court application. I've read through. Took me a long time. It's like over 300 pages to read through the two briefs, and those were just summaries of the evidence. And no, if necessary, the Alberta government can also opt out of a bad court ruling using Section 33 of the Charter. So I feel very encouraged that there's at least one government, and I think other provinces were talking about doing the same thing. So there is this pushback. It's later than what we might want, but there is this pushback against harming children with transgender ideology.
Before we started recording, you were talking about how like there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on in the courts. I think you measured it to, was it COVID or the convoy? I wasn't sure. Can you mention that again? Because I thought we see it. It's just how you mentioned it. It just really kind of made it more tangible to understand the difference on the rulings.
Yeah, there's definitely a double standard in this ruling. So we had a bunch of COVID rulings come out where citizens challenged the COVID restrictions as being violations of their freedoms of conscience, religion, expression, association, peaceful assembly, travel, mobility, bodily autonomy, so on. And by and large, in most of the court cases that the Justice Centre had on the go, the government's admitted in court that yes, these lockdown measures did violate the charter freedoms of conscience, religion, so on and so forth. But then the courts were incredibly deferential to the government, and they said, well, you know, we're not sure about the science. One judge said that she was neither equipped nor inclined to resolve scientific controversies regarding COVID-19, right? Which is a total abdication of her responsibility as a judge, which includes looking at and grappling with scientific evidence. So the long and short of it was, most of the court rulings during in regards to lockdowns, the courts deferred to the government and said, you know what, the science is not clear and we're not scientists, so you can do whatever you want. You just go ahead because the science is not clear and we're neither equipped nor inclined to grapple with the science. So they let the government violate our rights and freedoms. Now, with this case from last Friday, June the 27th, this Egal Canada versus Alberta on this legislation to protect children from transgender ideology, all of a sudden, the court is not deferential to government. The court is not saying, well, you know, there's the jury's still out. There's still a lot of research being done on this. You know, there's some reports say that this is good for kids. Some reports say it's bad for kids. And because the science is not totally settled, we're just going to defer to the government and leave it to your discretion to do what you deem best. No. No, the court embraced the argument from Egal Canada that somehow not giving puberty blockers and opposite sex hormones to children somehow is a violation of their right to bodily autonomy and their constitutional rights, which is quite a stretch because you don't really have all these rights as a child, you know.
Is there any way we can like do what they do when, you know, because we just talked to Chris, he's, you know, the one who's representing, you know, Evan Blackman, and Evan got like, you know, his court case came and it got, he had a good ruling from a judge, and then the Crown comes in and does an appeal to do another court case. Can we just like, is there someone who can appeal this and say, all right, we want to move on to another judge with another decision?
Well, this is an interim ruling, right? It says that the government's legislation, Bill 26, is going to be not in force for the next few months or probably years until there's a full final hearing. So the Alberta government can definitely appeal this ruling to the Alberta Court of Appeal, and they can say, no, the trial judge made a whole bunch of errors and we want this overturned.
Right.
And so that they can then have the legislation enforced to protect children over the course of the next few months and years while this court action, you know, makes its way to a trial and then a ruling.
And there was another option there you said with the charter that Alberta can do?
Well, at the end of the day, and I think the Alberta government's not going to do this initially at the trial level, but they can use Section 33 of the Charter, which allows governments to opt out of a court ruling. So, for example, Bill 26, if the trial division, the Alberta Court of King's Bench, if they say that, this legislation to protect minors is an unjustified violation of the Charter rights and freedoms, then, and if that's upheld by the Alberta Court of Appeal, the Alberta government can then say, you know what, notwithstanding this court ruling, we think the court's got it wrong, and we're going to move ahead and we're going to enact this legislation anyway, and we're going to protect minors from puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. So that's a unique feature of the Canadian Constitution. For better or for worse, governments can opt out of court rulings that they disagree with.
Have you heard anything that might happen?
Well, I think Premier Smith was asked about it, and she said that I'm paraphrasing here, I may have, I don't know if I heard it right or not, but what I recall is she said that this section, using Section 33 of the Constitution to opt out of a court ruling, is on the table as a possibility, but they don't want to do it now immediately. They want to first let the court process proceed and see what the courts have to say. And presumably she means at the trial level and then also at the appeal level. So she's not going to rush into using that.
The thing is that we've had programs where we've actually had guests on who, wanted to change their sex, and they went through the promises of, this would all work and everything would be wonderful hereafter. And they went through the surgeries and everything else, and then that nothing's changed. And in fact, they're going to be a slave to drugs and prescriptions and all that kind of thing the rest of their life. And the one thing that comes to my mind is a young lady who wanted to change her sex. She thought she wanted to be a boy, and so went through the thing and then realized that no, she didn't want to do that. And so she was trying to, get back to her
detransition.
Detransition. And bottom line, she's crying because she used to be able to sing as a girl, but when she took all these puberty blockers and everything else, it changed her throat,
her voice,
and her vocal cords, and she can't sing now. And there's a small child involved, and she wants to sing lullabies to this child, and she can't, and she's crying. And I mean, I see that story. I've seen that story played over and over again in interviews, and it's like, good grief, have we totally lost our minds that we have judges and people in educational offices that we are living in a barbaric situation. It's unbelievable.
We also have a federal law in Canada. There's a criminal code provision, which was supported, by the way, by the Conservative Party of Canada in the opposition. They voted in favor of this. It is a criminal code offense to help a gender-confused person to reintegrate their mind with their body. So in other words, offering counseling or therapy, or prayer or all three to somebody, if somebody is gender confused and they're not happy with their biological body, right? So a boy who wants to be a girl says he really is a girl trapped in a boy's body, or vice versa, a girl wanting to be a boy saying she's a boy trapped in the wrong body. If you try to help those people, whether they're adults or children, if you try to help them by saying, okay, well, when did these feelings start and what happened? And if you try counseling to help them to get to a point where they are happy with their biological sex, or at least not unhappy, right? That's a criminal code offense in Canada. Thanks to Bill C-4 that was passed. It was rushed through Parliament quite quickly with the full support of Pierre Poilievre and the Federal Conservative Party. So, it's there's a big, heavy price that we pay for not being engaged in the democratic process. And Canadians were, I think, asleep at the wheel or asleep at the switch. I don't know what the expression is, but they pushed this through on the pretext of banning conversion therapy, which resonates with a lot of people. They think, well, you shouldn't be trying to change people's, if they're same-sex attracted, you should leave them alone. So on this banning conversion therapy slogan, they put it into the criminal code that you cannot help a gender confused child to come to accept their biological sex. That's illegal in Canada.
But
So seems to be a
you can help the
dichotomy,
child
though.
the other way. The confused by a lot of their sex. The indoctrination, you can do it the other way. That's not a problem.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And same way, if you're a counselor or a pastor or a priest or a psychologist or whatever, and if you get a straight client who's attracted to the opposite sex and they say, I've got these brand new feelings that are emerging and I think I might be attracted to the same sex. As a counselor, you can say, oh, well, you should explore that. And maybe you are same-sex attracted. Like you can encourage people to move in that direction. But if there was a same-sex attracted person who came into a counselor's office and said, or a priest, pastor, psychologist, whatever, and said, I've been same-sex attracted for a long time. But, recently in the past, whatever months or year or two, I'm starting to experience these feelings of attractions towards the opposite sex. Well, the counselor cannot encourage that and say, well, take the ball and run with it. That's illegal. So the legislation, federally, at least with the criminal code, it's in one direction only.
Yeah. Well, John, we really appreciate having you on the show because this is a bizarro world we live in and you handle it really well. I know you've got many cases. You read lots of documents. We appreciate you explaining it to us and we're definitely going to have you back.
Well, thanks for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you.
All I could say, Alan, is we definitely need the Lord to come and heal our land. It needs healed.
Amen.
It's crazy.
Yes.
You want to help support our mission, keep this kind of conversation and truth on the air. We are viewer supported. It's because of your wonderful gifts that we can continue to broadcast this show. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, and click on donate. That way you can give digitally. If you'd like to give through the mail, you can. You can make your gift payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association and send it to 246 Stewart Green Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H 3C8. And if you'd like prayer, you can call our toll-free line in Canada, 1-800-915-0056. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later.
Love you.